Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Plain and simple, revenge doesn't have to take a lifetime. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And between you and me, if you like how we're doing things around here, I'm going to assume that you do because you're listening right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, pay us a visit over at In the Seats. It's where all this was birthed, where it all began, where we cover basically the moving image at large. It's film, it's television, it's festivals, it's video on demand, from all across the globe. We just love it all. And we love writing about it and talking about it. So please come on by and read about it and listen about it. On this episode, we got a good one. We got an interesting one. It's about the film Alice, which is in select theaters now across Canada, but coming to VOD, video on demand, this coming April. And it's a real interesting one. It's the story of Alice, played by Keke Palmer, who spends her days enslaved on a rural Georgia plantation, yearning for freedom. But after a violent clash with the plantation owner, Alice flees through the woods and stumbles onto the unfamiliar side of a highway, realizing that the year is actually 1973. And again, it's pretty wild. She's rescued on the roadside by a young disillusioned black activist named Frank, who's played by Common. And Alice discovers the truth and all the lies that have kept her enslaved over the years, and embraces the ideal of black liberation. And I'll be honest, this movie is a little bit all over the map, but it's really interestingly done so, because it's a revenge movie, it's a piece of history, it's social commentary. It's a lot thrown together in a really, really entertaining way. As long as you're willing to get a little gonzo with it, I think Alice works kind of well. And I mean, we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with writer-director Krystin Ver Linden just to talk about the origins of the story and the casting, and just putting strong female characters out there like Alice, and people like Pam Grier, who we've seen in the past and is referenced in this film, and so many others, and really just sort of redefining what it is, what a female-driven story is when it comes to the cinema. Because let's face it, the ladies can be badass and kick ass all at the same time. So this is definitely one of those films that kind of tears away sort of the stereotypes of the quote-unquote female-driven storytelling. But again, I think it's really good storytelling, which at the end of the day is what's important. But go check out Alice, either at a theater near you or when it comes to video on demand this coming April. But first, check out our talk with Krystin, because it's a good one. But I mean, first off, obviously, just thank you for the time today, and I mean, congratulations on the movie. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Now, walk me through the origin of the story, because, obviously we have seen sort of the liberation of slavery, people from slavery before, and we've seen the revenge story before, but we've never kind of seen them mashed together like you do here.
Walk you through it. Well, I read a series of articles, true events, and that's what inspired the movie, because they were all so preposterous to wrap my head around mentally, that as a writer, there was no way you could go to bed that night after reading 12 different events and then doing a deep dive to not say, oh my God, let me even write out a scene to see what this would look like. And that's what I did. So in 48 hours, I was like, let me just see what it would be like to just write out a scene just for fun. And then it just, when there isn't the pressure to write, then miraculously you end up writing an entire thing.
Because without giving too much away, obviously that moment, that shift in the movie is such a WTF moment. I mean, while you were putting it together, I'm kind of curious, like, how cognizant were you of sort of how much of on a dime, like, you were taking audiences, really taking them into this sort of next step of the evolution? Because, I mean, I loved sort of the jarring nature of it. It really caught me off guard.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have a dark sense of humor.
This makes perfect sense.
So, to me, when I was editing the movie and that moment you're speaking of happened, and she meets Common, when Kiki meets Common, Alice meets Frank, I thought it was going to be funny. So in my head, I'm like, this is hilarious. But the beauty of art is, no matter what your interpretation of that moment is, it's still a moment that affects you emotionally. And that's the point.
No, for sure.
So my logic was, what would be the downshift, because part of the comp or energy for the second half of the movie, once what happens, was going back to all of the films, of course, like, E.T. or any, or what a comp was being there with Peter Sellers.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So when he first leaves his house and you realize that really nice house is now, the ghetto has overtaken the house. Right. He sees the gang members and he's a fish out of water. He only knows this one thing. He only knows the inside of that house. So that was a big comp for me. And as a movie nerd, so I just kind of went down this rabbit hole. So in my head, I was like, if she's leaving one world into the other, what would be the most jarring thing she could experience? And so that was the most logical thing in my head.
Well, I love that. And I love that you're a self-admitted movie nerd, because in watching this, I definitely got a bit of that. And I mean, I'm very curious just about how you managed to cast this, because if you don't find the right actors to sort of sell it, it's not going to work. And Kiki does such a good job in this. I mean, can you walk me through just sort of finding and sort of settling on her for Alice? Because, I mean, I really think she's fantastic in this.
Kiki is Alice. So when I finished writing Alice, was unfortunately when the George Floyd tragedy happened. And, then there were all the magical protests and all that stuff happened. And every time I went on social media or even lifted my phone for Apple News, there was Kiki, on the front lines, speaking up, telling her truth, uncensored, unfiltered. And what I admire about her. And so I flew to meet her, and we sat in a cafe for 4 hours, and we opened up. And what was beautiful was I could see in Kiki the post, once she becomes radicalized version. But once I got to know her, I realized, oh, wow, she actually, when she was growing up, she felt like she didn't have a voice. She felt like she had no control over the outcome of her future. And so that really drew me into, God, I hope she does this, because there's no other person I could imagine that could actually do it and have the acting chops to really sell this.
And I mean,
emotionally.
No, obviously. But I mean, on top of that, I kind of love that you used Pam Grier basically to embolden her. Like, how important was it for you to sort of really tie pop culture into this and sort of make the Alice character that much more sort of self-aware and well-rounded?
Well, as a writer, it's a form of catharsis. So I leaned on what inspired me as a kid, which was movies and music. Yeah. And so as I was writing the script, I was writing to the music that I put in the script. And then I was thinking of the movies as a kid and as a teenager and a young adult that empowered me when I was going through hard stuff. And Coffee was one of those films that was empowering and did leave a mark on me in one way or another, that it's okay to be vulnerable and have pain and still cut someone's head off.
Yeah.
Kidding. But ultimately, yes. I mean, Coffee, blaxploitation movies come in an array of different shapes and sizes, and there are some great ones and then some that are junk, like any genre.
Of course, yeah.
Coffee is one of those movies that really, when you boil it down, is a beautiful drama, you know? So that's why I thought, who better for for Alice to see than, you know, Pam Grier, or see Diana Ross, who is also, you know, in 1973, the biggest artist in the world. And it didn't matter what her race was. She was on the face. She had more magazine covers in 1973 than any other performer or artist or actress or anybody. So I thought that there was something to be said for that.
No, for sure. And I mean, I think something else that really resonated with me is just, I mean, as much as the film just sort of not hits on the time and self-empowerment, but also the realities that there can be sort of interracial, like discrimination inside a race. I mean, I think particularly with the scene with Common and sort of just dealing with his boss. And I mean, I think that for me, I don't think I've ever seen that really depicted quite so well before. Like, how important was it for you to sort of just show that how antiquated sort of ideas and discrimination can permeate everywhere?
Exactly. And I'm glad that you picked up on that, because that was something I really did. And of course, in the script or the final cut or the director's cut, it goes deeper. But that was really important, because I also wanted to show the class system. So when you the class system is just as big as racism, and ultimately they're one and the same. They're just two levels of the same ladder. And so, you know, his idea of making it was to be, you know, Frank's brother, his idea of making it was to become part of the system and to become a right-winged, Nixon-loving person, but also have the, you know, there was a prejudice for his workers, and he had a field of his own. So it was, it was kind of my way of showing the class system, and I guess capitalism on some vague level.
Now, I mean, I'm kind of curious, because I mean, especially in watching the film, it ultimately to me felt like you made a blaxploitation film of the era, but today. How would you sort of define Alice as a film?
I would say that, I mean, that's a good way of putting it. I would say it's a nod to a genre that I love. It's a nod to two genres that I love. And it was a gift to be able to play in two worlds for my first movie, to be able to go, I'm going to do, you know, I love movies like Night of the Hunter.
Right.
It's like, oh, wow, I get to do a Southern Gothic movie for 30 minutes. And then I get to go play in the 70s and not pay homage to blaxploitation movies that inspired me. So I would say it's like any cinephile's little fun fantasy for.
No, I mean, I've got to ask, just, I mean,
it's based in reality. But.
Well, for sure. No, absolutely. I mean, as all good stories are, really. But I mean, I've got to ask this, just based on the posters that are behind you. Like, I love that you're a movie nerd, because and not enough people admit to it. They want to seem more academic and sort of into it and all that kind of stuff. What were the movies for you that sort of had the light bulb go off and, you know what, I got to do this myself. I've got to tell stories.
Well, there were movies, but there were filmmakers.
Okay.
So to me, there were, as a little kid, they were the reason I wanted to become a filmmaker. I wasn't concerned with the actors. I was, but as a little kid, I wasn't like, I want to be an actor. It was like, who did this? I want to do what they're doing. So Lawrence of Arabia was the first movie I remember seeing as a kid. David Lean became my hero. So then I got obsessed with David Lean. Then I got obsessed with Sam Peckinpah. And so Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, to me, is one of the greatest Westerns of all time. So that would be an influence. And then Akira Kurosawa, of course. And then Akira Kurosawa influenced Sergio Leone, and and then Andrei Tarkovsky influenced Stanley Kubrick. So these are like my Mount Rushmore figures. And so I justify every film they ever made as like, well, look, he was trying to do this, even if it's like not one of their better ones. Like Sam Peckinpah didn't have a lot of control over a lot of his movies that he did with studios,
Right?
Like Major Dundee. But then you're like, well, if you take out the score and you boil down the story, like you can see it's Sam Peckinpah, so I can appreciate it. So those, I would just say, it's the conglomerate of all of my heroes films. I'm always going to put those as the greatest films of all time. And then on a contemporary level, like Paul Thomas Anderson to me is a young member of the Mount Rushmore because I love him.
What I love about just talking to you, and obviously with this film, we live in such a day and age where like female-driven cinema and female-driven voices are being pushed to the forefront, but referencing Sam Peckinpah and Major Dundee doesn't necessarily fit into that mold, that stereotype that people expect when talking to a female filmmaker. But I mean, I think that's why this is so perfect. And I'm kind of curious, how important is it for you to put not just a female-driven voice out there, but a voice that is putting cinema first as opposed to trying to tell a female-driven story, like in the quote-unquote stereotype?
I love that you say that because I don't even look at myself. When I'm writing, I'm not like thinking of the gender, which everyone does. So it is funny because I think people expect women to write romantic comedies or softer things. But I just hope we get to the point where there are more women that, I mean, look, every artist should tell what's in their heart, but I love, if that's the case, that I'm picking up the mantle of, I can tell stories like, male, masculine stories, and my heroes were masculine people. So, oops. God, I'm so sorry. Sorry.
But I mean, it just generally goes to the point that, ladies can do kick-ass kick-ass filmmaking and storytelling and
exactly
sort of driven shit like this film is. And I mean, I absolutely love that. And I mean, I like personally, like, I'm a fan now. I'm a fan of yours. I can't wait to see what's next, honestly, because I want to see more stuff as a film fan, as a film individual that knows to reference sort of, like you say, some of those greats on Mount Rushmore, but still sort of giving it some fresh spin at the same time. And I think you really do that here with Alice.
That means so much. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again for the time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.